welcome back to Microeconomics with me, Professor Ledwinski. We are continuing on here in our unit talking about comparative advantage. And what we're going to be doing in this video is discussing how we can use this idea of a production possibilities frontier to talk about the macroeconomy and to talk about growth. So let's go ahead and jump in. In this course, you're going to see three different types of production possibilities, two of which you've already seen. You've seen a production possibility graph represented as a straight line. This is when we have a constant trade-off between two goods. There's no change in the trade-off happening. This happens when we have an individual, where the individual can be an individual person, an individual company, or even an individual country in some examples, which admittedly is going to get a little confusing because we're going to talk about a different way we look at countries in a minute. The second way that we represent, you'll see a PPF, is where there's a collection of a couple of different lines with different slope. We saw this in the earlier video when we were talking about combining Burton-Erny's production. This is the efficient combination of a set number of individuals together. And you'll use this when you can know who those individuals are or know how many there are, and you're doing that combination discretely. Now, when we have a bunch of individuals, say if we have a bunch of different companies and individuals producing in a macroeconomy, this gives us the third type of PPF. This is a smooth curve. We haven't seen this one yet. This is when a large number of individuals are producing together, such as an entire country. And so this is our production possibility frontier for the entire economy. It's still going to be downward sloping. This is because of the scarcity principle, right? It's downward sloping because there are trade-offs. You have to give up something to get more of another good. It's also going to show us what combinations are not producible. This is due to limited resources. The other thing the PPF is going to give us in a general sense is the points that are efficient. The efficient points are only the points on the production possibilities frontier. Right? Furthermore, the general PPF shows us the points that are unattainable for now, which we'll be getting to soon. These are the points outside of the production possibility frontier. Finally, the production possibility frontier shows us what points are inefficient. These are points that are obtainable. We can do them. They're on the inside of the production possibility, but they are not using resources efficiently. When we naively combined Burton-Erny's production, we were producing inside the efficient PPF. It was attainable but inefficient. This in the macroeconomy can be when we're kind of unused infrastructure such as buildings or factories. It can happen if we're making mistakes, unemployment, things like that. Businesses sometimes collude and hold back quantity. That can lead to an inefficient production point as well. So to introduce this frontier in a more general sense, I'm going to look at steel and ketchup in this example. Here is a production possibilities that is a smooth curve. The efficient points are the points on the frontier. So A, B, C, D, E, and F are all efficient points. They're on the frontier. Unobtainable points are points like G, where they are outside of the frontier. There's no way we can produce G right now with the known technology and the resources we have. Inefficient points are any of these points inside the frontier, like H. We could produce at those points if we're not being careful with how we use the resources. If you remember from our example with Burton-Erny, just to emphasize, we had that combination of resources and we were producing at that inefficient point. It was inside their combined production possibilities frontier. Now, I do want to do an aside and say, does this mean that you have to be working all the time? And that is one of the limitations of this PPF model. we don't have leisure shown here. Right? And so what I want you to think about is this is the possibilities given you're working a set amount and given that your resources are being used for a set amount, because we don't have other things that are important and good included in this model. So if that's helpful, then you can think about it that way. One of the things that this smooth PPF helps us to think about is the idea of opportunity cost. And in particular, it helps us show how when we combine multiple people, just like when we combined Bert and Ernie, there's a changing opportunity cost. Right? And as we move right to left, there is an increasing opportunity cost. Right? So let's say we want more steel, and we're starting at point E. In order to get 20 more steel here, we need to first give up 30 of our ketchup. And so we gave up 30 to get our 20. Moving from 30, 50 steel. Let's say we want more steel, right? Well, if we're doing this efficiently, the first people we're moving to have steel are the most efficient, and then we're slowly having to move less efficient people who are better at catch-up or resources that are better at catch-up. To get our next 20, moving from D to C, we have to give up 50 catch-up. Then moving from C to B, we have to give up 80 catch-up. So what this is demonstrating is that specialization means that there is increasing opportunity cost. We have to give up more and more and more to get a set number of another good. Right? And this smooth curve demonstrates that in terms of there's no straight parts on this curve where the trade-off is constant. Unlike when we had the kink curve, there were two discrete straight points. And so what we're having here is showing the consequences of specialization. And it's showing what happens and how the economy looks when people are specialized in terms of doing steel or ketchup. It means that the trade-offs there increase. So let's talk about where specialization comes from and what are factors that can lead to more or less specialization. The most important thing that you need for specialization is you need a lot of people, and a lot of people that can trade together. And so higher level of population density makes specialization easier. Also, anything else that brings the goods that can be exchanged together, that connects markets, leads to the ability to specialize. So the increased ability to transport goods over long distance, the decrease in the cost of transporting those goods, the ability to communicate about the needs for goods and services, all those things lead to better and higher ability to specialize. The other things that help specialization are legal frameworks that support businesses in terms of them setting up and having protections, and financial markets which can enable new businesses to start and people to start something that is more specialized. So specialization, as we have shown, can increase production possibilities. We saw that in our small example with 2 producers, and we also saw that in our kind of economy-wide example that we looked at. I'm going to kind of throw out some questions for you to think about. I won't go into depth in them, but we might want to think about, is specialization always good? Right? This is a model that we are looking at, and we want to think about the pluses and minuses of that model. So, in what circumstances might there be too much specialization, where specialization could be potentially causing a negative consequence? Can you think of any? Are there any negative impacts that you can imagine happening from specialization? Also, what other things might this matter in life, but are left out of this model that's simply focused on how much gets produced? So these are questions that you can think about. If you're in my class, we can discuss. But just to kind of throw out some things, people people enjoy doing different things. Right? So maybe over specialization can lead to a dislike of their work environment, just to throw out one. But there's plenty more that we can discuss. One last thing to talk about in this section is that the production possibilities frontier. It's not static. What we can make as a country, as an economy, and even as individuals changes. The production possibility frontier is a static snapshot that represents our current possibilities, our current choices. But changes occur over time, and the things that can drive the changes are change in resources, an investment in capital, or population growth, improvements in technology, more kind of specialization, a startup switching cost, increases in knowledge. This can lead to technology, but it also can lead to the kind of productivity of people as they have knowledge that already exists and that gets disseminated. You're here taking this course, listening to this video, increasing your knowledge, probably increasing your future productivity, right? That is increasing and changing the PPF. Right? So the PPF, as it changes, there are three ways that a particular change, one change that is happening, let's say it's a technological improvement, can impact our production possibilities frontier. And let's look at this example here using coffee and donuts again. So the three ways that the PPF can change with a technological improvement. Now, the improvement is always going to be shifting out. It's always going to, with a technological improvement, it means we can make more with the same resources. Right? So we can have an improvement that only impacts coffee. We can have an improvement that only impacts donuts. And we can have an improvement that impacts both coffee and donuts. And I want to illustrate how these look on our production possibilities frontier. So here is the version where you have a technological improvement and it makes it easier to make coffee. What this does is shifts our PPF out and up. Right? Every point has actually shifted on this PPF. Even though it's only impacting coffee, every point has shifted except one. The only point that hasn't shifted is the point where you are only producing donuts. So we could have a technological improvement in coffee, and you could choose, well, we don't need to make more coffee. Right? You could keep your coffee production the same, maybe if you're at this highlighted area, and just increase donuts. Right? Which in some ways seems weird. Wait, coffee got easier to make, but we're making more donuts. But what's happening with that example is that you're shifting resources. You don't need as many to make the same amount of coffee. You're shifting resources from coffee to donuts. That is different from the possibilities. Right? This is our production possibilities. It doesn't tell us what to produce. Right? That has to do with your preferences. Right? So these are two different ideas, production possibilities versus preferences. Right? So we can have a technological change that makes only impacts coffee. We could also have a technological change that made it easier to produce donuts but didn't do anything to coffee. How this would look is shifting it out to the right. And with this technological change, the only point that hasn't changed is the point where we're only producing coffee. You're not going to be able to produce more coffee if you are just producing coffee. However, you are going to be able to, if you want, to produce more by moving some resources from donuts to coffee. Right? The reason that this point hasn't changed is because if you're producing only coffee, there's no way to shift resources from donuts because you've already done that. The third way that the PPF can be impacted by a technological change is that the technological change makes both easier to produce. And in that case, right, every point gets shifted. The production possibilities get shifted out. Right? So what we've put out here for you is a way to represent the macroeconomy and to think about those three different ways that we are using the production possibility curves to represent things, right? One consumer or country, when we have a set number of consumers or countries, and when we have a uncountable number of people working together, right? That's where we have that smooth curve, because there's so many small tiny kink points that they kind of just smooth out, right? And that's how we're representing the macroeconomy. And then the other thing that I covered here was thinking about that technological change and growth, pushing out that production possibility frontier. What I'll talk about in my next video is applying this idea of specialization, not just across companies and individuals, but internationally. So we'll be talking about the example of international trade. So thank you for joining me for this video and this unit on comparative advantage. I hope you keep watching. Send me an email if you have questions. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Until then, take good care.